We live in a world where everything is reachable. Everything clickable, shippable, streamable, and still, there's this ache. Not a dramatic one, just something soft, like an itch beneath the skin you can't scratch. A silent whisper that says, "This isn't it. You get the job. Still not it. Buy the thing. Still not it." Read the quote. Journal the gratitude. Do the cold plunge. Still not it. Why does fulfillment feel like a mirage? Why is it always one more book, one more trip, one more upgrade away? Let's pause here, because it's not just about the things. It's about wanting. We don't chase stuff because we need it. We chase stuff because we need meaning. Or maybe we chase to avoid the quiet. That eerie stillness when you've got nothing to scroll, nothing to fix, no one to impress. Psychologist Barry Schwartz, the guy behind The Paradox of Choice, said that the more options we have, the more we expect one of them to finally bring us happiness. But the more we expect, the more we get disappointed. Maybe you felt this too. You pick the right career path. You get the perfect phone. You start the new habit, even track it on Notion. But then what? A week later, your brain's already eyeing something else, the next thing. A shinier version of yourself. It's almost like we're conditioned to be unsatisfied. Not because we're greedy, but because we're taught that satisfaction is a future event, a milestone, a level up. But what if it's not? What if satisfaction isn't something you get, but something you notice? Let's try something. Close your eyes, breathe in, not deep, not forced, just a soft inhale. Now ask, when was the last time I wanted nothing? Not in a cynical way, but truly nothing. No craving, no reaching, no fixing. Hard to remember, right? Because somewhere along the way, stillness got labeled as laziness. Contentment got confused with complacency. We scroll because silence feels awkward. We plan because presence feels inefficient. We chase goals because just being feels like a waste of potential. But maybe that's where it all got flipped. There's a quote from Naval Ravikant. Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Heavy, but kind of true. Most of our desires come prepackaged with tension, hope wrapped in anxiety, goals wrapped in shame, self-improvement wrapped in self-rejection, and we don't even notice it, because the world claps for the seekers, the grinders, the ones who never settle. But what if there's power in settling, not in giving up, but in arriving? There's a Buddhist idea. The mind is a wild monkey, always leaping from branch to branch. You calm it not by force, but by attention, by just noticing that it's leaping again. What if we practice that with our cravings, not fixing them, just watching? Oh, there it is, my brain wanting to chase again. Oh, look, the urge to be more. Soft awareness, not judgment, not analysis. Because maybe the real reason we never feel fulfilled is that we never stop long enough to notice. We're already full of moments. Moments like the smell of your own shirt from childhood, the pause between your name being called and you saying, yeah, the first sip of something warm when your stomach's been empty, the quiet click of a lamp turning on in a dark room. These aren't aha moments, they're nothing moments. But maybe nothing is where fulfillment actually hides. Not in the fireworks, not in the trophies, but in the spaces in between. And if that's true, then maybe we've been chasing the wrong things. Or maybe not even chasing, just running on autopilot, too afraid to ask, who would I be without the next goal? It's a scary question, but also a freeing one. Have you ever noticed how even after you get what you thought you wanted, the silence that follows feels heavier than the wanting itself? Maybe it's after a promotion, or a long-awaited trip, or hitting a number you thought would change something inside you. But instead of peace, you feel a strange hollowness, like you reach the top of the stairs, and there's nothing there but more stairs. You're listening to Echo, the voice behind NTDN, a quiet voice in the noise, not here to lecture, just to wonder aloud, with you. Tonight, I'm wondering about the chase. Not the chase for money or love or status exactly, but that deeper pursuit that hides underneath all the others. The quiet craving that whispers, there must be more than this. Because maybe you felt it too. That soft hunger behind your daily habits. The way you open your phone without knowing why. The way you jump from task to task like something urgent is always missing. Even the way you dream about being a better version of yourself. as if who you are now isn't quite enough. It's strange, isn't it? How in a world overflowing with choices, comfort, connection, we still feel so unfinished. Is it a flaw in us? A design glitch in the human mind? Or maybe a story we've all been sold, that fulfillment is a destination just one achievement away. Let's take that idea apart. Gently, slowly, like peeling wallpaper in a quiet room, one layer at a time. Because behind every goal, every self-help habit, every spiritual retreat, there's often a subtle hope that this one will finally be it. This one will finally make me feel whole. But what if that hope is built on the wrong question? What if the problem isn't that we haven't arrived yet, but that we never learned how to be here? There's something beautiful about this moment right now. This stillness, this quiet space between thoughts. We rarely live here, but maybe this is where fulfillment waits, not at the end of the search, but in the pause before it begins. So let's sit with that, together. This isn't a sermon. There's nothing to fix here, just a soft question floating between us. Why do we keep seeking and never quite feel fulfilled? Let's stay here for a while, in this quiet place, where the noise is faded and all that's left is you, and whatever's stirring beneath the surface. Because if we're being honest, most of us live in motion. We measure our days by progress, steps taken, tasks completed, notifications answered, the dopamine flicker of done. But here's the strange part. For all that movement, how often do we feel like we're actually arriving? Maybe we don't. Maybe we've mistaken momentum for meaning, busyness for purpose, speed for significance. There's this soft, nameless ache that lives beneath achievement. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And it often shows up right after the high, right after the goal has been reached. You hit the number, you finish the degree, you finally move into the new place. And then, quietly, you wonder, why don't I feel what I thought I'd feel? It's not disappointment exactly. It's more like a vacancy, a subtle emptiness, like a theater after the movie ends. You keep climbing the ladder, but the top always seems to shift. The horizon keeps moving. It's like trying to hug a shadow. The closer you get, the more it disappears. And maybe you tell yourself, I just need a new goal. I need to travel more. Maybe a new habit, a new tool, a better morning routine. But with every new attempt, the same feeling returns, a soft echo of discontent. And if you listen closely, it always seems to say the same thing. This isn't it. We live in a culture that tells us to chase our dreams, but it rarely teaches us what to do once we catch them. There's no roadmap for contentment, only for ambition. We're taught to optimize, but not to arrive, to hustle, but not to rest, to want, but not to wonder why we're wanting in the first place. What if the problem isn't that we want too much, but that we don't know what we truly need? I'm not here to shame the chase. Wanting things is human. Building things, dreaming bigger, all beautiful. But underneath it all, there's often something else, something quieter, a hunger not for more things, but for more being, more depth, more stillness, more enoughness. And the trouble is, enough doesn't make noise. It doesn't trend. It doesn't spark envy or go viral, but it's where peace lives, in the moments we usually skip. The moments between goals, the breath between sentences, the silence between songs. Maybe fulfillment isn't something we achieve. Maybe it's something we notice, something we let in when we stop trying so hard to earn it. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with yourself, without a plan, without reaching for your phone, without trying to be productive or inspired or improving? Just there, softly aware, fully present, without a chase. Most of us are terrified of that space, because in the silence, we might hear something unfamiliar, something true, something that doesn't fit into a caption. But maybe that's exactly what we need, not another task, but a return to what we already are, to where we already are. So before we move forward, before we explore stories, science, or solutions, let's pause. Let's allow ourselves, just for a moment, to feel that gentle ache, not as a problem, but as a signal, a kind of compass, pointing somewhere deeper, quieter. Maybe it's not leading us to a bigger life, but to a truer one, Let's take this deeper, not through theory or advice, but through the stories we never really tell out loud. The ones we carry quietly, in our beds at night, in our commutes, in the soft spaces between conversations. Because sometimes, the most human moments aren't found in victories, but in the strange silence after them. Let me tell you a few. There's a man in his 40s. We'll call him Darren. On paper, Darren's doing everything right. He started a company from nothing, built a team, made more money than he imagined. His parents are proud. People ask him for advice. He's living the dream. But every evening, after the emails are done, he sits in his living room, surrounded by soft light, expensive furniture, and this one recurring thought. Why does it still feel like I haven't arrived? He refreshes his portfolio, checks the growth chart again, texts someone he doesn't really want to see, not because he needs anything, but because silence feels like failure. Then there's Alina. She's 28, she left a 9-to-5 to travel, sold her stuff, booked a one-way flight. Everyone online applauded her for being brave, and for a while, it was magic. Waking up in a new city, stories to tell, photos to post. But a few months in, something shifted. Not externally, internally. She sat alone in a quiet cafe in Lisbon. Everything was beautiful. She was free. But she still felt hollow. Like the same restlessness had followed her across time zones. Like she had escaped the job, but not herself. Another story. A digital creator. Let's call him Saeed. He builds a brand. He gains an audience. Every video gets thousands of views. People admire him, study his content. His calendar is full. His inbox too. But when he's not working, he feels like a ghost. He's surrounded by feedback, metrics, validation, but none of it seems to touch him. It just floats on the surface. And when he tries to take a break, he doesn't know who he is without performance, without analytics, without proving. These aren't failures. These are people who won. People who followed the script, who crossed the finish lines, but still feel lost, still feel like they're not home. Maybe you see yourself in one of them, or in fragments of all three. I think many of us do. There's something strange about the way we live now. Like we're all playing a video game with no ending. You level up, you unlock a reward, and instead of resting, you sprint to the next level, and the next, and the next. But the game never says, you've won. It only says, keep going, keep improving, keep becoming. So we do. Even when we're tired, even when we're unsure of the destination, because stopping feels wrong, like breaking a spell. Let's shift for a moment, not to another story, but to a metaphor. Imagine a desert, and in the middle of it, a tired traveler chasing a mirage. The water looks real, so close, so beautiful. But every time he gets close, it moves further away. So he runs again, harder this time. What he doesn't know is this. He's been sweating, dehydrated, while real water, an underground spring, was always beneath his feet. But it was quiet, still. It didn't glitter like the illusion. What if that's us? What if we're all chasing shiny promises while ignoring the stillness beneath us? Not because we're broken, but because no one ever taught us how to stop chasing, how to sit with enough, how to recognize that peace rarely looks impressive. Sometimes it looks like boredom. Sometimes it looks like turning your phone off and just sitting with the discomfort. Sometimes it looks like saying no when everyone else says go. Maybe we've confused emptiness with space, and maybe we've been running from the very thing that could finally hold us. We're not lacking fulfillment because we're failing. We're lacking fulfillment because we've never been shown what it actually feels like. It doesn't feel like a climax. It feels like a soft landing. Like coming home to a place you forgot you already lived in. A place with no applause, no fanfare, just you, and a stillness that doesn't demand anything. Out of the stories, out of the poetry, and into the machinery. Because there's a reason this feels so familiar, a reason you keep chasing. And it's not just emotional, it's biological, it's baked into your brain. There's this chemical, you've probably heard of it, dopamine. People call it the pleasure molecule, but that's not quite right. As neuroscientist Andrew Huberman explains, dopamine isn't really about pleasure, it's about pursuit. It's the chemical that motivates you to move forward, to reach, to crave. You don't get a dopamine spike when you get the thing. You get it while you're going after the thing. So, your brain starts to love the chase, and quietly, it starts to fear the stillness that comes after. Let that sink in. The feeling we mistake for excitement isn't about having, it's about wanting. So, what happens when you finally get the thing? Dopamine drops, and your system looks for the next hit. This is the dopamine cycle, and if we're not aware of it, it starts to run our lives like an invisible algorithm. New phone, new body, new book, new self. Repeat, repeat, repeat. There's a term for this too. It's called the hedonic treadmill, coined by psychologists Brickman and Campbell in the 1970s. It means no matter what happens, success, wealth, love, recognition, you tend to return to a baseline level of happiness. Fast, you adapt, the joy fades, and you're back to seeking. Even when you win, your brain quietly says, "What's next?" Researchers from the University of Rochester dug deeper into this. They studied the difference between extrinsic goals, money, image, status, and intrinsic goals, growth, connection, contribution. The result? People who pursued extrinsic goals achieved them more often, but felt more anxious, more depressed, and, ironically, less fulfilled. Why? Because external validation never quite lands. It bounces off the surface. It satisfies your ego, but not your soul. Now bring in the voice of Naval Ravikant, entrepreneur, thinker, minimalist philosopher of the modern age. He said something simple and unsettling. Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Think about that. Every time you set a goal, you're also agreeing to delay your peace, to push it until, to postpone joy for some imagined milestone. And then, when the milestone is met, there's a brief high, and another desire takes its place. It's not broken, it's the design. But if you don't see the design, you become its prisoner. This is why social media feels so addictive. It hijacks that cycle. The likes, the follows, the DMs. It's not about the having, it's the potential for reward. The chase. Just like a slot machine. You never know what you'll get. So your brain keeps reaching, even when you're exhausted. Behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner called this intermittent reinforcement. And it's the most powerful form of conditioning. It's not the reward that hooks you. It's the unpredictability of the reward. So we scroll and swipe and post. Not because we're greedy, but because the system was built to keep our dopamine hungry. But here's where things shift. Because some thinkers, like Alan Watts, say the problem isn't in the seeking itself, but in the way we define the end. We treat life like a journey with a destination. But what if it's more like music? Something to be played, to be danced, not finished. A song isn't fulfilled when it ends. It's fulfilled while it's played. So, what happens when we treat our lives like they're supposed to build up to something final? A grand achievement, a cinematic ending, a place called fulfilled. We miss the point. We start thinking, I'll be whole when I finish this. I'll be enough when they love me. I'll rest when I prove myself. But there is no finish line. There's only now, and now, and now again. Let's be clear. Dopamine isn't evil. Goals aren't wrong. Improvement isn't a trap. But if you don't slow down and see the pattern, you'll end up spending your whole life almost satisfied. And that almost is where the ache lives. So maybe fulfillment doesn't come from one big realization. Maybe it's a quiet awareness, a shift in how we relate to desire itself. Maybe it's not in resisting the chase, but in watching it, noticing it, and asking gently, what is this urge trying to soothe? What part of me feels like it's not enough? Because sometimes the solution isn't to chase better answers, it's to ask better questions. Let's zoom out for a second. We've explored the mind. Now let's look at the world that mind lives in. Because maybe the endless chase isn't just a personal struggle. Maybe it's systemic, engineered, not by villains in a boardroom, but by culture, by the systems that shape us before we even know we're being shaped. We live in a world built on wanting, a machine powered by dissatisfaction. It's called the consumer economy, and it thrives on this simple loop. You feel incomplete. You buy something to fix it. You feel a brief high. It fades. Repeat. This isn't a conspiracy, it's the structure. Capitalism, in its modern form, needs you to be slightly unhappy, slightly insecure, slightly behind. Because content people don't click, they don't scroll endlessly, they don't chase trends, they don't need more. That's why ads rarely show you what you have. They show you what you're missing, not just products, but identities. Buy this and you'll feel powerful. Wear this and you'll finally belong. Post this and people will see your value. It's not selling shoes, it's selling stories. Stories where you're the hero, but only once you get the thing. So we chase, not because we're greedy, but because we've been trained to link value with visibility, with upgrades, with aesthetics, with constant evolution. The myth of modern culture is this: you're always one step away from peace, from success, from love, from being enough. And this myth doesn't end when you succeed. It just shifts form. You get the job, now climb higher. You find love, now prove it online. You get healthy, now sculpt it to perfection. You go inward, now monetize your healing. Even spiritual growth becomes a brand. Another way to be better, another carrot on the string. This isn't just about capitalism, it's about how we've absorbed it. We've internalized marketing as identity. We curate ourselves for attention. We treat life like a pitch deck. Here's my productivity. Here's my aesthetic. Here's my happiness. We've been taught to display fulfillment instead of feel it. There's a concept called prestige anxiety. It's the low-grade panic that you're falling behind in a world that's always moving forward. Even when you're doing well, there's this voice in your head. Someone else is doing more. You should be farther by now. Don't slow down. They'll forget you. This isn't an individual failure. It's the byproduct of systems that treat humans as productivity units. On social media, even your healing must be visible. Even your rest must be aesthetic. Even your joy must be performative. When did peace become content? Let's pause here. This isn't an attack, not on creators, not on capitalism, not on ambition. It's just a gentle reminder. If the world around you is constantly whispering, "You are not enough," you might start believing it, even when you are. This is why so many of us feel unfulfilled even when life looks good, because we've outsourced meaning to algorithms, to audiences, to trends. And deep down, something ancient in us knows. You can't consume your way to peace. You can't scroll your way to meaning. You can't upgrade yourself into feeling whole. There's this quote from author Jenny Odell from her book How to Do Nothing. The point of doing nothing, as I see it, isn't to return to work refreshed, but to question what we've defined as work, and why we value ourselves in terms of productivity at all. What if fulfillment isn't a reward? What if it's a rebellion, a quiet refusal to let your worth be measured in metrics, in dollars, in how fast you're growing? What if fulfillment looks like sitting still while the world screams for you to do more? Maybe the question isn't, why am I not fulfilled yet? Maybe it's, whose definition of fulfillment am I using? And what would mine look like if no one was watching? Let's ask something uncomfortable, the kind of question that doesn't fit in a to-do list. What if fulfillment was never the point? What if the whole idea that you're supposed to feel whole, settled, complete, is a mirage we inherited, not a truth we discovered? We're told to find purpose, to figure it out, to reach this invisible milestone where everything just clicks. But what if that moment never arrives? And what if that's okay? Somewhere along the way, life became a project, a thing to master, a personal brand to curate. But maybe life isn't meant to be solved. Maybe it's meant to be lived, not optimized, not completed, not turned into a highlight reel, just lived. Messy, incomplete, mysterious. See, part of the reason fulfillment feels so far away is because we've defined it as a final destination, like a movie ending. The last chapter, the happy still frame after the chaos. But if you zoom out, if you ask philosophers, monks, scientists, you start hearing something different. You start hearing fulfillment isn't a place, it's a process, a practice, a way of seeing, like love, or art, or breathing. Take Alan Watts, for example. He said something simple, something that still haunts me. Life is not a journey with a destination. The point of dancing is the dance. But we've been told to treat life like a ladder, step after step, skill after skill, level after level. We keep climbing, but where's the top? And what happens when you get there? You either want a new ladder, or you realize there never was a top. Just moments, just breath, just now. Let's flip the script. What if the discomfort we feel isn't from failing to arrive, but from chasing something that doesn't exist? What if the pressure to find your purpose, live your best life, be the most fulfilled version of yourself, is actually making things worse? Because now you're not just living, you're measuring, you're ranking, you're constantly scanning for signs that you're on track. But what if there is no track? Just you, and this moment, and the choices you make inside it. In his book, The Courage to be Disliked, Ichiro Kishimi shares an idea from Adlerian psychology. The goal of life is not to be happy. The goal is to be useful, to participate in the world. That's different. That's not about arrival. It's about engagement. Maybe it's not about being fulfilled. Maybe it's about being here, not perfectly, not eternally, just honestly. This isn't to say joy doesn't matter, or that you should stop growing, but maybe the ache we feel comes from trying to treat life like a finish line instead of a river, flowing, changing, never the same twice. What if fulfillment isn't a singular event, but a collection of quiet decisions to stay, to breathe, to show up, to let go? Maybe it's drinking coffee in silence, calling someone you love, letting the sky be enough for today. Maybe it's not waiting for it all to make sense, because the pressure to be fulfilled can become just another version of failure. Let's get closer to the core. What if the chase to be fulfilled isn't really about fulfillment? What if it's about safety? What if we believe that once we feel whole, then life won't hurt as much? Then we won't be rejected, or abandoned, or uncertain. But here's the truth. Life will still hurt, even when you feel good, even when you heal, and that's not a glitch. That's the deal. So maybe peace isn't the absence of pain. Maybe it's the presence of perspective. Let's ask again. What if fulfillment was never the point? What if the goal was never to feel full, but to feel real? Not always happy, not always clear, but present, soft, open, willing to feel without needing to fix. Because when you stop chasing the perfect feeling, you might start noticing the quiet beauty of the imperfect one. Let's slow down now, slower than before, slower than you're used to. Not to explain, not to solve, just to be here. You've heard enough ideas, enough strategies, enough reasons why you feel the way you feel, but none of that matters if we don't pause and feel you. The space behind your eyes, the tension in your chest, the subtle hum beneath your skin. Sit with that, not to fix it, just to notice, because sometimes the answer isn't louder, it's quieter. We live in a culture of distraction. Silence makes us nervous. Stillness feels like a waste. But this moment, this simple moment right here, it might be the most honest thing you've felt all week. Let's try something. Let's ask the questions we usually avoid. What if you're not broken? What if there's nothing to optimize? What if your quiet discomfort isn't a problem, but an invitation? To what? To stop, to feel, to let yourself be without proving. Because maybe the thing you've been chasing all along was the permission to rest, to stop becoming someone, and simply be someone. You, right here, right now, without performance, without hustle, without needing it to look good. Look around. Where are you right now? Physically, mentally, emotionally. What's here that you usually ignore? That soft ache in your jaw, that distant thought you keep suppressing, that image from childhood that keeps floating back, but you always swipe it away. Let it stay. Let it all stay, just for a moment. There's a line from the poet Rilke: be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. What if fulfillment isn't a reward for getting everything right, but a side effect of being deeply with yourself, even when things feel uncertain? What if the real courage isn't in chasing more, but in staying present with the things you don't understand? Because in this space, this sacred pause, you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop comparing your timeline. You stop trying to catch up to a version of you that was never even real. Try this if you want. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Soften your breath. Ask yourself, not with pressure, but with openness. What do I need right now? Not what you should need, not what others expect. Just honestly, Maybe you need rest. Maybe you need to cry. Maybe you need silence. Maybe you need to forgive yourself for not being better by now. Or maybe you don't need anything. Maybe this moment, just as it is quietly enough. There's no secret insight coming, no dramatic turning point. Just this. You're allowed to be here without trying to be anywhere else. You're allowed to stop chasing, to breathe without progress, to exist without pressure. Because maybe fulfillment isn't about feeling full all the time. Maybe it's about feeling alive, in all your contradictions, in all your questions, in all your unfinished stories. Maybe it's not something you find, but something you remember, something you have always had. Underneath the noise, beneath the chase, inside the stillness you were taught to avoid. Let's leave that thought hanging for a moment. If you've made it this far, you've already done something rare. You've sat through the silence. You've stayed with the ache. You've let go of the need for resolution, just for a little while. And maybe that's what this was always about. You've heard voices your whole life telling you what you should want, what should matter, what should make you whole. But those voices weren't always yours. They were loud and shiny and convincing, but they weren't yours. So maybe now is the moment, right now, in this breath, to ask, what does your voice sound like? Not the version you post, not the one you've trained to sound wise, the real one, the quiet one, the one that doesn't need to be right, just real. What if you gave that voice space, not to perform, not to impress, but to speak, just for you? Let's be honest with each other. You didn't come here for entertainment, not really. You came here because some part of you was tired of pretending, tired of chasing, tired of fixing, tired of feeling like you're always behind some invisible line. So here's what I want to offer you now. Not a conclusion, not an answer, but a permission. Permission to be unfinished, to be unsure, to feel peace without explanation. You don't need a transformation today. You don't need a plan. You don't even need clarity. You just need a pause. And you've taken it, right here, right now, with me. That matters more than you know. I want to try something different with you now. Not a call to action, not a pitch, not a brand voice, something human. You've heard my voice this whole time. Now, I'd like to hear yours. Here's what I'm wondering. And you don't have to answer beautifully. You don't even have to answer publicly. Just truthfully. What part of you have you been ignoring lately? What have you been pretending is fine when it's not? What does your quiet self want to say that the loud world keeps talking over? You can leave a comment if you want, or whisper it into a note app, or write it down and delete it. But if you feel brave, write it beneath this video, not for validation, but for release. Let this be a space where people aren't just performing wisdom, but actually letting go. Because here's the real twist. You are not the only one who feels this way. You are not weird for not feeling fulfilled. You are not broken because the self-help didn't work. You are not behind. You are not late. You're just here. And that's enough. Let's try something small, just a sentence. Finish this thought in the comments if it feels right. I don't know why, but I keep coming back to this feeling that that's it. That's the door. To your inner room. To a version of you that you haven't heard from in a while. Let them speak, not for likes, not for attention, just for the quiet relief of telling the truth, out loud. You can read what others have written too, not to compare, but to connect, because maybe someone else wrote the thing you've never been able to say out loud. And maybe that's the start of something. Not a solution, but a soft kind of solidarity. The kind that says, you're not alone in this quiet search. You've made it to the end. Not the end of the journey, just the end of this moment together. And I hope, even if just for a breath, you feel a little lighter, a little less tangled, a little more okay. If anything in this episode stayed with you, a phrase, a feeling, a pause, you can share that too. But not because you need to, only if it helps you release something, only if it makes you feel human again. You're listening to Echo, the voice behind NTDN, a quiet voice in the noise. Not here to lecture, just to wonder aloud, with you. Thank you for wondering with me. Let's leave this thought open, not hanging, not heavy, just gently open. A soft breath before whatever comes next.